Quad 66, doing an update video here. So on 2S motors, and specifically, so I've gone through a bunch of stuff, and I'm specifically trying to fly on these tiny little, for 2S, and these little 300 milliamp batteries. And the reason for that is because you can keep the weight really low, and if you can fly on this and you keep the weight low, your electronics are going to be fine, and also you're not going to destroy your props on every single time you fly. And that's not true when you bump up to bigger motors like the 1204s, especially if you're flying this on 3S with like a 450 milliamp 3S. That'll just destroy. If you're flying on Gen Fan 3018s, which I want to fly on, it just destroys it. Plus, it also kind of pushes it to where the weight for me, I'm not entirely comfortable flying around like pets and like, you know, having close by neighbors if they're out. I don't want to send, you know, a 100-gram quad spinning off into there. But the quad that we're flying the most right now, the motor we're flying the most is this Jing 1202 8000 kV, and it's a perfectly fine motor. It's like, I think I'd be perfectly happy with it if it was my only choice. But the problem is, you know, obviously I've got more choices, and there's some things about this 1103 that I just like better, and I'm not sure how to like commit to one versus the other or where I should go next. And so going through it, I think the first thing to kind of go through is just durability issues. So this is a really light motor. This is like a 3.5 gram motor, and it's really light, and that's nice, but it's fragile. Like, we've gone through a bunch of these, and you can see actually on this build here where I actually had to cannibalize a 1S motor. I popped the bell off there and changed it out because I bent one of the bells, and I like flying this and I didn't want to give it up, so I'm like, all right, you know, I'll take a 1S motor and use that. But fortunately, these are actually pretty easy to repair. So these C-clips are easy to get off, and you just pop the C-clip off, pull off the bell, switch it out, and it's actually a pretty easy repair. And also you can order these from, if you order them from the SkyStar store, you can order them for, they're cheap, they're like $6 a piece, and it's like, man, that's not that bad. Like, you know, some of these other motors, you know, are kind of in that $12, $13, $14 range. And so if you can get two of these for the price of one, it may realistically last just as long at the cost. So what's nice about the Hyperlight versions is the wires are a little bit longer. On SkyStars, these are unfortunately a little bit short. And on a 120 millimeter frame, to reach some of these, if you're mounting up square, you have to put little extenders on, which is annoying. So I think if I was going to stick with these, I'd probably switch the board to the diamond layout. But anyways, kind of a tangent there, but I'll kind of go through it. But anyway, so the main issue with this motor really is going to be the durability. And then but the reason I think it's worth investigating is because I really love the way it flies. So when we compare the 1202 Jing 1202, and so that's an 8000 kV motor, to the 1103, and I'm not 100% sure, is it the weight or is it the kV? Because this, I'm kind of cheating here, right? Because this motor is a little bit too light, it's a little bit fragile, and is that why we're getting the benefit, or is it just the matter of the kV? Because I'm comparing 11,000 kV versus 8,000 kV. But anyways, the main benefit I'm seeing is that the 1103s just have a little bit more top end, which makes sense, and I'm seeing that whether it's on in a little bit better low throttle resolution. I see that on this build, and I think it's just true. I think it's an 1103 feature because I also see it on, you know, the 65 millimeter build with those Emax motors. Versus the 1202, it seems like it's got a big chunk of response, like throttle, but then it kind of gives up towards the top end. But when I'm flying this, it's a little bit mellow, and particularly if you're trying to go into a split S and you're trying to flip it over real quick, this responds just fine if it's the only thing you're flying. But if you kind of flip it back and forth with the 1103 build, this one just, it snaps over quicker. It's just got that responsiveness that I'm looking for. And so I'm kind of like, all right, well, if that's what I like, if it's 1103 I like, then what should I do? Because I don't really want to deal with how fragile these motors are, and I don't really want to deal with, so the Hyperlights, I can't find them right now. They're supposedly they'll be getting more, but on the SkyStars version, you know, the wires are a little bit short, and it's like, you know, 3 months to get them from China kind of deal, and so that's a little bit annoying. So then the question is, is there another 1103 to consider? So the other 1103s I've been flying are these AMAX, and these are 1103 7500 kV. If we look at the magnets, so one of the reasons I think I like these motors, besides the weight, is that these are super notchy. They've got these curved magnets, and they're just super notchy. And I think that helps when you're in an overprop situation. So let's see if you can kind of, I don't know if I can demonstrate it well with just how these just really kind of snap into place. And that is more so than these Jing motors. And these Jing motors, when you look at them, you know, they still have the curved magnets. They look like, you know, pretty decent air gaps and whatnot. But if you kind of just go through these are just a little bit less notchy. And you would think with the 1202, with the extra torque, that, hey, this is going to, you know, control the prop better. But it's a little bit more forgiving on tuning it, but in terms of that responsiveness, it's just not quite there. And so I do wonder, is it the KV, or is it, you know, the motor weight? But anyways, one of the ways to start solving that issue is at least get it onto the same KV. So, you know, one of the options is I could get these SkyStar motors in 8000 kV. So that's an option. I do know that these Emax motors are a whole lot more durable. Unfortunately, I had a whole other extra set of these, which I was going to build up on a 120, but I was tuning out on 65mm props, had a desync and killed one of the motors, and now I'm down to 3 extra instead of 4 extra. So these are not quite as notchy as the Hyperlight motors, the SkyStar motors, and you can see they got the flat magnets, pretty reasonable air gap. But the notchiness of these, I would describe it as very similar to the Jing Nano 1202 motors. So that would be kind of a nice comparison, a direct comparison of the 1202 to the 1103. I think the notchiness is pretty similar. And that would kind of tell us, like, you know, how good is the 1202 versus the 1103 in terms of just kind of the stator volume. Obviously, the best thing would be to compare them, you know, with the same manufacturer, but I just don't have that option. Another motor I've tried, which is to me is kind of interesting, is like, is it the stator height that helps things out? I've tried these Pyrodrome motors, and so these are 1203, and these are 7000 kV motors, and I was kind of surprised. These motors just underwhelmed me. They did, honestly, they did come on into their own with the HQ props on the so the 3015 props. On those props, they did manage those better, and I did like these motors a whole lot more. But one of the issues with these motors is they're not particularly efficient. They kind of suck through these 300 milliamp batteries probably a little bit too fast, and probably you should be flying them on 450s, and that just gets into the weight thing, because already, so when we're talking about motor weights, you know, we're going from a 3.5 gram motor up to, they list these at 3.8, but these are more like a 4 gram motor. And then you're up into like a 4.2 gram motor, and then I think this takes you to like 5-ish grams on the 1203, and then when you get up into the 1204, then these are a whole lot. These are like 6.5 grams, I think. So, anyways, you know, based on that, I think things just interact, and I'm not sure why this motor just kind of underperforms. And I would test it more, and I'd replace one, but I killed one, and then they discontinued them. So these are, you know, I'm stuck with a set of 3 of these, and I don't know what to do with them. If you need these, by the way, let me know. I've got 3 that I'm not really doing anything with. So if I had my way, what I would do, if I had my choice, and it really makes me a little crazy that, so with Flywoo, these 1202.5s, in 1S, I really like these a lot. So that, you know, on the 11,500 kV motor, I really like the way these fly a lot in 1S. And it's funny too, because they're not, when you turn them, they're not crazy notchy, so I don't know why they respond the way they do, but they do on 1S. But anyways, if they made these in like an 8,000 kV or, you know, 8,500 kV, something like that, I would jump on these. And I still need to fly them enough to know if the durability is there. I hope it is, because I do like them on 1S, but I would jump on those, but those just don't exist. One of the things I definitely don't recommend, which going against the grain here of a lot of people, like, you know, their TB3s, and they're flying on you know, some like the 1303 or these 1204s and 5000 kV, and so you can fly this. So this will suck right through. You can't fly it on a 300. You could, but it just, there's not enough. You need more battery than that. But on a 450, that's enough battery to do the 1204. And yeah, it flies okay-ish, but it's just underwhelming, and it's heavy. So I don't like. Why would you do that to yourself? Sure, it's controllable, but you're dealing with the mass, and then also what I find is that once you go past the 300 milliamp battery and you start getting into slightly heavier build, these GemFan props just stop holding up. So on 1S, they seem pretty durable. Like you fly them on your, you know, your 1S 1202.5 build, and on that build, these props last a long time. You fly them around, bash them, and they survive. But once you start increasing the weight, you start bending the tips, you start doing things to them. And so for me, in terms of tolerating the inherent sort of durability of this prop, my breakpoint is sort of like 2S 300 milliamp and, you know, a 1202, maybe up to a 1202.5. But once we get into 1203 motor and needing 450 milliamp batteries, or a 1204 motor and 450 milliamp batteries, the props just don't hold up, and those GemFans on. So when you start flying this on 3S, those props really don't hold up. Like that's like you get maybe like 2 flights out of them if you're flying aggressive and smashing into stuff. So I guess one last thing to mention is I really do like this combination here. So I really do like the way these 1103 AMAX motors fly, and that's one of my motivations of like looking at the 1103 too, is because it's like maybe a little bit more flexible. The 1202 motors, just they're not good on these 65 millimeter props, and the 1103s, they have a little bit more range on them, and so they seem to they pair up better with the T65s. This build isn't quite right. Really, the way that these motors would work well. So if I was rebuilding this, and I'm not because I don't feel like tearing apart this other stuff, but when I kill these motors, maybe I will. Those motors I think would be fantastic. Building it up on 110 millimeter with the integrated board like this B-Brain brushless board, where you're really keeping the weight to a minimum. I think that would be a really, really nice combination on these. With a slightly heavier build here with the stack and whatnot, it still works really well. It's just, it'd be nice to take a tiny bit of weight off of it. But anyway, so that's kind of one of my thoughts of like, you know, in terms of which way to go. And I'm curious. So part of it to my hesitation with these AMAX motors is that these look like they're discontinued. So AMAX, I do know where to find some more, and I'm not telling you. Because if I want to buy more, I kind of want a first chance at it before they all sell out. But I do know where, well, maybe I'll say, so Rotor Geeks, they've got some. But anyways, on AMAX, their site, I don't see these motors anymore. I'm assuming that probably means they're discontinued. So it's like, it's also, I don't want to invest my time and tuning and effort into a motor that may not be here for very long, even though I kind of like the motor and I'd like to know how it flies on 3S. But it's disappearing, so do I really want to invest in something and then I'm like in search of the motor again? So I would really appreciate, one, if anybody has like connections to Flywoo, hey, please convince them, or you know, convince them to make this motor in like 8,000 to 9,000 kV, something like that, so we can fly this on 2S. I think it would work well. It may not, and if it doesn't, then I guess it'd be my fault. But anyways, but what I'm thinking about doing is, one, should I just kind of bite the bullet to figure out, is it, you know, to do what I think would be a better comparison of motors that seem to have a more similar kind of feel to them in 1202 versus 1103, and sort of like, in my mind, settle the stator height debate a little bit, because it's a process. It's like we want to do the stator, and then we want to do the magnets, and we want to kind of figure it out, then we want to do the KV. So that would kind of answer that question. But I'm a little bit worried that this motor might not have the notchiness it needs to control the 3018 prop as well as I'd like it. And so then I'm also not that excited about like plunking down a whole bunch more motors and just having, yes, I'd have backups for that one, but it's just, you know, backups. And then obviously I'm not like super excited about the issues with the, you know, the durability issues. I'd like to jump on a motor that has a little bit more durability. So basically, I guess what it comes down to is, you know, here's my question is, does anybody know of an 1103 motor that comes in around 4 grams, so around this, like, so that's got durability similar to this AMX motor, it's a good quality motor, but has the notchiness of these, you know, Hyperlight / Skystar / Speedix motors. If anybody knows what that motor is, please, please, please let me know, and hopefully it's not something that's discontinued. I know there's the barred motors, the little floaters. I'm kind of hung up on the weight. Those motors just seem like they are, you know, like probably a gram, maybe half a gram, just heavier than they need to be, and I'm hesitant to go down that route because I don't want to go over that tipping point where we can't fly into 300s anymore. And to me, that's kind of like, I don't want to go down the route of getting into needing a 450 milliamp battery, because then it just snowballs, and I don't feel like dealing with that. But if you know of a motor, 1103, nice and super notchy, about this sort of balance in terms of durability and weight of the AMAX motor, let me know. I would jump on that pretty quick. I think that's my ramble for right now. Till next time, cheers.